Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Constable Irina Yashnik, and I will be your moderator for today's news conference. We're here today regarding the 11th homicide of 2019 that occurred on August 2nd. With me today are Chief Nishan Durayappa and Acting Inspector Michael Pulley to provide details of the investigation. Once the conference concludes, they will be available to answer several questions. I would like to remind you that this investigation is still ongoing, and some details we will not be able to share. A media release will be issued shortly after the conclusion of the conference. A full stream of this video will be available on our YouTube channel. I would like now to turn over the microphone to Chief Durayappa.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. It is my pleasure to be here today, not only to support the communication of something that is been resolved, but also to support the hardworking members of our Homicide Bureau that worked tirelessly during this investigation to conclude it. Although I've only been chief now for the third day, I think what these arrests symbolize is an ongoing commitment that the law enforcement community always has front and center. And I know that firsthand from being briefed about the work that our officers have done in various investigative bureaus, but particularly that they work tirelessly in this case. I'm here to reassure everyone that the Region Appeal is committed to public safety, and it's my personal commitment to continue to place significant emphasis on situations like this. And in this particular case, the capture of a murder suspect involved with senseless, and I say senseless because it is a remarkable incident to try to rationalize, and we all know from the date it occurred has impacted a community across borders because, you know, in a day-to-day life, you never foresee incidents like this happening. But with that, I would like to commend our Homicide Bureau and the Toronto Police Service, who were an integral part of some of the activities leading up to these arrests. I'm confident that we'll continue to do a remarkable job because community safety does not stop here. We know that crime also has no boundaries and that we will continue to collaborate across borders with resources to get this job done. Part of my role is also to ensure that you understand there's a commitment not just from an investigative standpoint, but from other avenues to continue to build a strong, vibrant, and resilient community. And in this particular case in Peel Region, to ensure that we achieve the vision of a safer community together. As it relates to the particular details of the investigation, I'm going to turn it over to Acting Inspector Mike Pulley of our Homicide and Missing Persons Bureau. Mike, would you like to come up, please?
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to provide an update into the murder of the investigation of Glensbert Sam Oliver, 63 years of age. On Friday, August 2nd, 2019, at approximately 2 a.m., several suspects attended the area of Lanebrook Drive, Brampton, for the purposes of breaking into vehicles parked in driveways in that area. Mr. Oliver and his son had exited their residence and found one of the suspects was in their vehicle. Mr. Oliver and his son confronted the suspect along with 4 suspects who were all working together breaking into cars on the street. During this confrontation, Mr. Oliver was with his son and both were stabbed. Mr. Oliver's son, Christopher, was treated at hospital for injuries and later released. Tragically, Mr. Oliver received fatal injuries and succumbed to those injuries at the scene. All 5 suspects fled the area in a dark-colored SUV, which we later determined to be a 2011-2015 Lexus R350. I am pleased today to announce that after a lengthy investigation that arrests have been made in this case. The investigative team assigned to the case worked relentlessly around the clock, putting all the pieces of this case together. I can say I'm proud of the work and dedication that was exhibited. On Thursday, October 3rd, 4 search warrants were executed in the Toronto area. 4 people were arrested for offenses related to the events of the evening that resulted in the death of Mr. Oliver. A 16-year-old male youth from Toronto is under arrest and charged with second-degree murder, attempted murder, and several other property-related and breach of court order offenses. A 17-year-old male from Toronto, a youth from Toronto, that was present during the incident is under arrest and charged with possession of property obtained by crime and failed to comply with recognizance. Additionally, two 18-year-old men from Toronto that were present during the time of the incident are as well under arrest and charged with possession of property obtained by crime and failed to comply with recognizance. A fifth male suspect who was in the vehicle at the time of the murder is still being investigated, and we're encouraging them to seek legal counsel and arrange the surrender to themselves to police. The vehicle that the suspects had been traveling in was stolen from York Region. It has been recovered by our investigators. I would like to thank our investigative team for their tenacious work, as well as the Toronto Police Service for their partnership during the investigation. I would like to thank members of the community who came forward. They provided video and eyewitness statements. The loss of Sam Oliver is tragic. It is heartfelt not only to the family, but to the community, and our deepest condolences go to Oliver family. Peel Regional Police are committed to the safety of our community, and while these arrests will not bring back Mr. Oliver and by no means heal the Oliver's family, it is a message to those who commit these types of offenses that you will be held accountable for your actions. We can now take some questions, but please bear in mind that it's an ongoing investigation still, and I'm unable to share certain details to preserve the case for court proceedings.
Can you just talk about what the reaction of the family of the victim was when you let them know that arrests had been made in this case?
So our VLO, who spoke to the family and has been dealing with them, has relayed that they're very pleased and very happy. Clearly, this doesn't, bring Mr. Oliver back, but there's solace in the fact that at least people are being held responsible for their actions.
Acting Inspector, this is quite shocking news. Four young men have been arrested. Just speak about the accused, that the age of the boy you say that you've charged with the homicide. Just can you and the charges he's facing, because that's not something that we should just gloss over.
I'm sorry, I can't say too much about him, obviously, because we can't say anything that's going to lead to identity or anything, but what specifically, I'm sorry?
Like, tell me about his age and you said he also he's out on a probation. Like, just tell me about, who have you charged with the murder and what is the charge exactly?
This 16-year-old youth has been charged with the actual murder as well as attempt murder.
Is that first, second? What are we?
Second-degree murder.
Okay. And you're alleging that he was also breaching a probation order?
He's been charged with breaching a court order.
So what does that mean for the public?
I can't get into the specifics of what kind of order it was right now, just because it could lead to identification of him.
But it's fair to say this 16-year-old accused was already before the courts?
Has been in the past, yes.
What recommendations would you make to people who come across or stumble on crimes in progress, whether it be a break-in or a theft from a car? What's the best practice for members of the community? What would you suggest?
Well, everybody reacts differently to crime when they see it, but obviously our approach would be always just call 911, be the best witness you can be, provide the best updated information to police. But it's not worth it to approach somebody, and we're not trying to judge by any means in what happened in this tragic situation, but I think we have to remember that property can always be replaced, but people can't.
And when you say be the best witness, you're talking about observing, getting suspect descriptions, what they're wearing, what they're doing, that sort of thing. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely, that's the type of thing I mean.
Okay.
I've got two, Mike. First of all, congratulations on the arrest, because all you had really was a grainy image of a vehicle, and then you had to go out and do this. It didn't sound easy. I'm hoping that you can shed some light on the investigation, how you came up with the best you can. And then I have a follow-up question, and we might need the chief's help on as well.
Certainly. Unfortunately, I know what you would like to hear, and I can't get into that right now in terms of how we got to where we got, because it's going to be unique and it's specific to the case, and it will be coming up in terms of evidence, and just to kind of ensure the integrity of the investigation and moving through court. I just can't share the methods that we used at this time.
Would it be safe to say that all of the different things that would, from DNA to witnesses to different, all of it's involved, or is it?
I think what I can say is that this was an investigation that utilized many different avenues, and everything came together in totality to present a very strong case.
The thing that stands out for me is that there's only one charge for murder and attempted murder. And I want to know, and I think the chief maybe could address this as well. You talk about deterrent. If you're running with people that are involved with such a murder of such a fine man like this gentleman, why not extend murder charges or attempted murder to the other victims?
Well,
Or the other suspects, sorry.
Right. So part of the problem in this is the investigation is still ongoing. And as information is developed, it's not to say charges wouldn't change down the road. At the time of the arrest, we're operating on the information we have at the time. However, there is still many investigative avenues that have to be completed, and those will be moving forward in the next month or so. So we'll have conversations with the Crown
So that could
Attorney.
still happen?
It's always possible, yes. Those were conversations between us and the Crown Attorney in terms of where we would be going down the road.
We heard from people in the neighborhood on the day of the murder that there had been a number of break-ins or attempted break-ins in vehicles, and it had been going on for a number of weeks, if not months, in that neighborhood. Do you believe that these accused may be related to some of, that sort of that rash of break-ins, or have you been able to link them to that?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that specifically. Our investigation was just covering the events of the night on that day. That particular night, we didn't get into backgrounds of previous. We would have looked at it, but that wasn't our main focus and concern, obviously.
But what do you say to people in the neighborhood who, to this day are concerned now, obviously more than they used to be, that should they, meet someone in their driveway or face them, this could happen to them?
Well, again, and that's where we talk about, knowing your neighbors, getting to know your neighbors, know who would normally be in a driveway, who wouldn't be in a driveway, so that you can make those educated decisions. Is this a stranger? If it is, then react appropriately. If it's not a stranger, somebody that might be somebody they know, then maybe like, hey, just so you know, this person was in your driveway. That's getting out and talking to the people in your community and getting to know who your neighbors are. It goes a long way, and video is... I can't say how important video is now. So, if you can invest in a video camera that's overlooking your driveway and catching the street, it's an excellent tool for investigators, and it's very helpful for us. I realize it's reactionary, but at least it helps us, and it can deter in some cases as well if people see cameras.
Are all four before the courts before or known to police? I heard probation, and is there? Can you go over that again? What?
So all four people that are under arrest right now are at Brampton Court today. They are being held for bail hearings.
No, but there's breaches and different things in the
Yes.
charges for all four?
3 out of 4.
I'd like to ask the chief a question, put you a little bit in the hot seat, chief, but in your third day, sorry to do that. But
Thanks,
Chief
Joe.
Saunders yesterday addressed this in tweets, and a lot of us have covered it, and that is, the bail issue. I don't know whether that completely relates here or not, because I'm not sure. But where people are before the courts or they're in trouble with the law and then they're out right away, that catch and release thing. I don't know if that applies completely here or not. But, this guy was in his own neighborhood. These guys came in there into Brampton and did this act. And they had no business being there, and they're also before the courts. And I want to know your reaction to the bail issue particularly.
Right. So, let me preface the overall statement is that, how we get to these situations is a confluence of different issues, right, that result there. And when you look at them as it relates to, Inspector Pulley spoke to a community being resilient, knowing each other, crime prevention techniques, knowing when to, make an observation and call us. They're all multiple facets of it. And I think we would, what resonates with the policing community is that the ability for the courts to place court orders on individuals and then the ability for them to abide by them is critical to the success of that vector. And when we see, and different organizations see it to different frequencies, when we see bail violations or breach of court orders, for our officers that, as you know today, have worked tirelessly, it's a frustrating thing. And clearly, personally, I would welcome, an environment where, there was more ability for us to not see the recurrence of breaches of court orders and whatnot. And so why that happens is, an interesting balance, right? We want to give people the ability to follow a court process, the evidence to take place, to be attested, but at the same time, the amount of frequency that our officers see people in a situation where they have already been on a court order and have committed another crime it is alarming. It is alarming, yeah.
And it's such a safe neighborhood, and has nothing to do with the neighborhood. I mean, there was a car stolen in York Region. The suspects are from Toronto, and there it is. And yet 3 of the 4 were known to the court system, and
Yes.
again, without knowing what those previous convictions were, but it is very, very concerning that this guy didn't have a chance.
We spoke about deterrence earlier, and part of the reason that we are here publicly is also to send a message that there is a swift response to incidents like this. The point being is the disparity between what caused this tragic circumstance, which is a theft from a vehicle, to where it ended up, is what has captivated the community and community at large. So this particular incident perhaps is one which showcases the reality of all these issues, because it's stemming from one of the most, and not trivializing it by any means, but unsuspecting circumstances resulting in one of the worst circumstances.
Chief, sorry, I was going to ask a question. Can you confirm that the arrest made in the 11th homicide of the year here in Peel region is in any way related to one of the 2 recent gang-style related killings in September, whether that be the Malton incident or the one at 410 in Beauvais in Brampton, or there was one in central Mississauga, actually 3 in the span of 4 days? Is there any way there's any correlation or tied to that?
I understand that at this point, there's no information relating it to any other incident. I think you heard Inspector Pulley say this, the investigation has specifically focused on that evening. We have no information that it's related to any other incidents within our region, for sure.
And I just have one more follow-up, more directed towards you. A big part of being chief of police of any region is cultivating trust and showing transparency with the people you serve. How specifically will you go about this? I mean, there was, in the past, former Chief Jennifer Evans was often criticized for being somewhat cold, which created a sense of mistrust in the community. How will you go about that and cultivating relationship?
Well, all I can do is speak to myself and what I'm aware this organization does at present. Today, this morning, I started the day with a shift in Brampton, and every one of them starts their day with the wholehearted commitment to go out into their community and do exactly what you described. For me too, it doesn't stop with me, so that will continue to happen regardless.
Okay.
Congratulations on your appointment, by the way. I didn't get a chance to say that. Just curious on your thoughts on handgun bans as what the City of Toronto is considering on doing. What's your thoughts on that? And you think it'll have an impact?
Well, I think this is such a significant issue. So one of the things that we've seen is, there's certain types of firearms the federal government is looking at restricting, controlling. What I've always said is any opportunity to mitigate risk in a community is helpful. At the same time, we also know that a lot of the firearms involved are illegal firearms, and they're not ones owned by lawful gun owners. Often those are the most responsible ones. The other half of it is, what's the framework for how a municipality would expect the management of that type of legislation is difficult. Is it another in a day where we as police officers 24/7 are the #1 call response for every type of incident, including social disorder, we are the ones responsible for it. Those are ones that most police organizations feel that there needs to be a better framework for if a municipality decided to go that way. I've seen my colleagues right across this country speak to that. I think you know, we know, this particular incident, apart and aside, because we know that illegal firearms are, one of the greatest problems, and that is one which requires, funding cross borders for us to be able to do investigations, right from, a border point right across suburban municipalities, right into an urban center. We know there's no boundaries for that. In my perspective, that would be an appropriate emphasis. We know in our region, in our municipality, we are in need of that support to continue to do some of the initiatives that we've seeded and began to do, and quite successfully. In fact, we've had another media release earlier yesterday that pertained to 7 months of shootings that have occurred and 10 arrests, and that took a significant amount of resources across multiple jurisdictions. And I'm not saying that there's a nexus to a handgun ban that would have resolved that, right? I guess that's the issue. I think our emphasis is somewhere else. Yeah.
In the case of the Malton case and the one the next day on the 410, I count that to be 9 people with guns, and one of them was murdered. So there's 8 potentially that are out there, and I wonder if the focus is more on the actual individuals than the guns. Obviously, the guns are a big part of it, but that's a lot of dangerous people, all in really one 24-hour period.
So, Joe, you're completely right. I think Chief Saunders said it perfectly yesterday, that the firearms are symptoms of the substantive issue and investigation. The secondary crimes that often accompany these incidents are interrelated, but they're not the causal factor. They're part of the symptoms for sure.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting discussion, because I think what we're really talking about is, it seems that people are and they're not okay with gangsters shooting each other in a back alley. I don't think that they're okay with that, but they tend to ignore it. But they really get upset, like the Malton case, or even this case that we're here for today, where it comes into a neighborhood where there's innocent people that have nothing to do with this. And you can talk about bans, and you can talk about, there's all these different things. Maybe we need to be on top of all, but I just want to say one other thing too, just because it doesn't feel right that somebody that would put down Chief Evans like that and talk about her being cold. I just want to say on the record, in my time dealing with Chief Evans and Chief McCord, nothing but professional, and I didn't feel good about that being said at your news conference. So but anyway, back to the other point about the neighborhoods. People are upset that this is happening in these neighborhoods where innocent people are caught in it. I think that's why we're all so on top of it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
We'll take, one more question.
Inspector, back to the reason why we're here. In the last, I'm going to say, week or 10 days, there was a similar incident in the same neighborhood where police apprehended the kids very quickly. They had canines in the area, so you were obviously watching that area. Did that incident have anything to do with the homicide?
So I'm not familiar with the incident you're talking about, but I can say confidently, no, that did not have anything to do with leading up to the arrest.
Is it fair to say that you guys were paying special attention to that part of the city?
If you're saying the Homicide Bureau?
No,
or
I'm just
Peel
talking
Regional
about
Police,
regular
I can't
patrols.
speak to the uniform side of the house doing their operations, but I'm sure that they would have been making note of it during their patrols, and they could have been doing community pop projects on it, but I'm not aware of it, so I can't speak to that, sorry.
Thanks.
Just real quick, how did you end up catching these guys? Was it help from the public? Was it witnesses? What kind of led you down this path?
Well, kind of like I think I said earlier, it was a combination of a lot of things. I can't get into the specifics of it because it's definitely going to be something that's going to come out in court, so you will see at that time. But what I can say is it was a set of unique circumstances that was created by our investigators taking new approaches and thinking differently in how they can come up with evidence, and it was very good work on their part.
I just wanted to ask quickly about the vehicle that you said was stolen from York Region.
Yes.
Were these individuals believed to be operating in a large geographical area? Can you talk about that?
So the people we arrested, our information is that they probably were indeed moving around. They don't know boundaries. They purposely select particular neighborhoods, I guess, in hopes of getting a good score inside the cars in terms of property.
And the person that you're looking for was believed to have been driving that car as a getaway car that night?
I can't tell you that. All I can say is the person was in the vehicle.
How old do you believe he is? Also a teen, or you don't have it? Do you have a?
We're still firming up identity, so I can't say whether it's a young offender or an adult yet.
Sure, I can just speak to the fact that I know our investigators have worked very closely with the family. This is a very tragic incident. We know that some of the extended family has also had a presence in the community. I had an opportunity to speak with the family and meet with them. And on behalf of the family, this is sort of a message from them, is that they're very thankful for the community support. They are part of the fabric of the community and we're well known. But their request, of course, is that this is a significant moment. They are continuing to grieve, and of course, they're asking for the space that allows them to do so. But on behalf of the family, they just want to give a public thank you to all the outpouring of support that surrounded them at this time. With that, I think we'll be concluding this, and I'll turn it back over.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This concludes our conference.